there's been so many changes in our industry, just in the entrepreneurial space in general in the past few years. But no matter what has changed, whether algorithms, whatever, all throughout the years, the only thing that has always stayed consistent and has always been my anchor has been storytelling. Storytelling is never going to go anywhere. The only thing that has changed about storytelling is the way that we share the stories. That's it.
Hi, guys, and welcome back to Interact's Grow podcast. It's so great to be with you as always. I'm your host, Jasmine Solana, and with us this week, we have a special guest, Akua Konadu. Akua, thank you so much for joining us this week.
Oh my gosh, thank you for having me. I'm so stoked to be here. Love you guys at Interact. I mean, I have my quiz on Interact. I mean, I met you guys at the Creative Educator Conference, which was so fun. So I'm just so stoked. So thank you for having me.
Yeah, of course. And I cannot believe, so we met, that conference was back in January. So we met 6 months ago now. And I feel like time has flown by.
I agree.
And probably so many different things have happened since then. But for those who don't know you, can you introduce your business and a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Yeah, of course. So I am a storytelling strategist. I love working with other business owners on how to use storytelling and infuse it into your content to help it make it easier to sell your products and services. I love that. I also am the co-owner of Akua, which is a gift subscription box business where all the products are from BIPOC and LGBTQIA business owners. So I also have that. And then I'm also host of the Independent Business Podcast powered by HoneyBook. So those are the things I do, which on the podcast, we break down the science of self-made success. So those are the three things I do.
Busy. I know,
busy. Yes.
I love that. And I love the concept of storytelling in business because I think it's, you think it's natural, but there could be a flow to it. There could be a strategy to it. And you probably don't even realize that you're already storytelling, right?
Yeah, 1000%. I think for me, people look at me and, I think some of us are natural storytellers, which that's great. I do think that storytelling is a skill that is learned and consistently exercised like a muscle. And anybody can be an amazing storyteller. That's just what I love about it, because it really, truly does give you the freedom to show up how you want on social media. Like, you're not putting yourself in a box. You are here to just lead with honesty and transparency, and you don't have to, right? Anything can just be made into a story, whether you're selling your products or services, or maybe whether you're nurturing your audience, whatever. I just love that it just gives you the freedom to be you, while also connecting with your target audience.
How did you get into storytelling as your business?
Yeah, so I fell into storytelling through pageantry, which is interesting. So, so I was back in college my junior year, and I have a degree in biology with a minor in chemistry. I originally wanted to go to med school. I'm first generation. My family's from Ghana. I was born in New York, and I've lived here all my life. However, just growing up, my family was like, look, I have sacrificed my life to give you a better life. You're going to either be a doctor, a lawyer, or engineer, something of status. And so from a very young age, I wanted to be a dentist. And so, and I feel like that was the goal, right? Because healthcare, the money's stable, it's very predictable, you never have to worry. And junior year of college, I realized that this just was not it for me. I was just not happy. I pivoted from dentistry, and then I pivoted to maybe nurse anesthetist. And I was working in the hospitals, to obviously gain those hours that you need when applying to whether med school or nursing programs or whatever. And I just couldn't do it. I think, coming from family that works in healthcare, you'll always have, my mom always said, you'll have a patient that really sticks with you. And I did. And I was like, I just am not built for this life. And so I randomly one day got a letter in the mail. And so while everybody was getting ready for their MCAT, because you're in your junior year, right? So people are already knowing what they want to do. I was doing nothing except just my classes. I just was like, I'm just trying to survive here. So one day I got a letter in the mail to compete in Miss Minnesota USA. And I was like, you know what? I could really just use some joy in my life. So I'm going to give it a shot, and let's just see how it goes. So I did some more pageant researching, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is a thing. So I was like, I'm going to show up prepared. So I actually trained for 9 months and then competed in Miss Minnesota USA, which was a really fun experience. I made top 15, and I was like, all right, I think this is something I really do want to do and see it through further. And it was so funny because I actually aged out of Miss Minnesota USA by 3 days. So I was like, oh, damn it. All right. So my pageant So my pageant coach was like, all right, like, look, obviously you aged out here, but I think this system, like, I think you should give the Miss Minnesota, like the international system a try. So I competed in Miss Minnesota International, and that's where I won. And that really just whole experience really shaped the trajectory of my life, because that is just where I learned about just how powerful our stories are, and the gifts through that. So in pageantry, you have to have what's called a platform. And so this is what, like, if you win your title, if you win, this is what you'll focus on for the year. That's what all of your speaking opportunities are focused on, whether, your volunteer opportunities are focused on, is for this specific cause. And so mine was No More, which aims to end domestic violence and sexual assault against women and children. And so obviously, just giving a really quick trigger warning. So I am a survivor. I grew up in that household. My father was physically abusive. And then I ended up in my own relationship later on. And so it was through that, which I wasn't very forthcoming with my story in pageantry. Like, originally my platform was STEM, which is science, technology, engineering, and math, right? I was like, this makes sense. This was safe. And my coach, as I was training, she was like, this isn't working. And I was like, what do you mean? She's like, this isn't working. Like, I don't feel connected to it. Like, something's missing. And so she was like, you know what, let's like sit down and let's talk. So she's like talking about me and getting to know my life. And I eventually just kind of like told her, and she was like, that's it. And I was like, no, it's not. We're good. You know what I mean? I was like, no, I'm not trying to like put my business out there, put my life out there. And also too, I was like, it's been years, I've moved on, and, I don't want to be like the poster child. Like, that's what I'm known for. And my pageant coach like said this to me, which has truly stuck with me. And I always just like pass this on to other people, which is like, your story is a gift. And like, there's somebody who has been in the situation that you were in before. And so your story is one that can help them come out of their situation, like where they can see like they can make it out of the other on the other side. So I was like, all right, let's just like lean into it. And then that's how I ended up winning. And then that's kind of where I spent my year just talking about this cause. And within that, right, it's a heavy topic, right? So like really learning the storytelling strategies of how to share it in a way where you're getting people inspired and understanding the importance of it, and where they want to take action instead of positioning in a way that makes people feel uncomfortable and stuff like that. So that's really where I learned a lot of that, and through that year about just branding and stuff like that. So that's kind of where I realized, okay, like I know I definitely don't want to work in healthcare. I know I want to do something. And so I was getting my year passed. I'm getting ready to pass my title on to the next winner. And I was sitting in a coffee shop, just kind of Googling. I'm like, all right, like marketing, Instagram, like I had no clue what I wanted to do. And so then I ended up coming across this website of this woman who looked like she was like living this very like beachy life, tussled curl, just living a life of freedom and peace. Okay. And I was like, I want that. I was like, whatever right. I was like, what she's doing, I want to do that. So I actually reached out to her, and I said to her, I said, look, this is where I'm at in my life. I would love to like know more about you and your business. And she emailed me back right away. And I thought she was living like in California. Fun fact, we were living in the same state. We grew up 20 minutes apart from each other. So her SEO game was strong. So she took me under her wing. I became a client of her, just like really learning just about like what she did, because that's what I wanted to do, and which is really cool. And then I finally graduated college, and then I moved back to the Twin Cities. And so she told me, she's like, hey, there's this group of entrepreneurs that meet once a month, and I think this would be really good for you to go. And I was like, all right, cool, like I'll go to it. Well, last minute she canceled. So I was like, well, look, I'm gonna go to this because I waited 4 weeks for this. I've been so excited. So I was like, I'm going to go by myself. So it was out in Lake Harriet, which if you're in Minnesota, it's the summer. It is packed, right? Because this is the only time of year that we experience warmth. So it is packed out there. And there were no signs telling me who this group was. So I'm walking around the lake, and all of a sudden, I don't know what it was, but it was just like a group of people. And I just like looked at them, and I was like, I walked up to them and I was like, hey, is this the group of like entrepreneurs that meet once a month? And they were like, yep, that's us. I was like, oh, okay, cool. Like my first try. And like, so I was like, okay, sweet. So I sat down with them, and they were so great, so welcoming, so warm. And I just kept going, and I still didn't have a business yet at this point. So, but I still kept going every single month for months, just hanging out, learning, understanding more about entrepreneurship. And so when I finally was ready to launch my business, they all like rallied around me and supported me. And that was through the Rising Tide Society, which is where I also learned about HoneyBook. And so here I am today, which HoneyBook has played such a major role in my business from the very beginning, which is wild to think about, back in 2017 to now 2024, where I'm now the host of the show. So really a lot of full circle moments there now that I think of it. But that's kind of how the long-winded story how I got started. So yeah.
should we just end the episode here? Because
That it was incredible.
honestly, that's incredible. Your story is incredible. Every time I was like, no way, no way. And then this, and then that, like,
Oh,
you
yeah.
need a show. It sounds like, yeah.
I mean, people tell me I'm funny and entertaining, so I wouldn't be opposed to it.
Yes,
So,
I love it.
yes.
I'm dialed in, that's for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah, but I mean, that's the beauty of stories, right? Like, I think everybody has a story. Everybody has a story, and I just love, like, I love these types of conversations where we get to sit down and interview or no interview, just friends in general, right? Where we're just sharing about the journeys of life, and it's just such a beautiful thing where you get to learn so many amazing things about other people. And so that's something I just love to really try to infuse into my business, where you're bringing people on this journey with you to learn the aspects of who you are, your products and services, the way that you view the world. It's truly like a gift. Like, I love it. It's so much fun.
I love that. So when you're working with somebody who's like, I don't have a story, what's like the top 3 like best practices, or like the top 3 oh my God, I can't think of the word, like main things you would tell them to pull that out of their life?
Yeah, 1000%. Because I am a firm believer that if you want to become a successful storyteller, because number one, we all have stories, and it's a muscle. You just have to train yourself to see them, right? And so it's just really simple. Like, if you want to become an amazing storyteller, you need to learn how to collect the stories. That's it. That's all you have to do. So what I always like to say to people, like, I'm a journaler. I love to journal. I love to process, and not everybody's like that, and that's totally fine. But I always like to say, like, ask yourself a simple prompt of like, what did you do today? That's it.
Wow.
Write down what you did right? Like, it's not profound. Like, it's just very simple. Like, you know what I mean? Like, please, people don't assume like I have like this magic trick in my skill. I do not. Like, it's very simple things that I do every single day. And it's like, what did I do today? Right? Like, so that's a simple thing. Or like, too, if you are a person that I don't like to write, I have my voice notes on my phone I just send people know I'm a voice notes girly too. So like, I will just send messages, or like send a message to myself, right? Or just recording myself, or just in my notes app of what I did today. But I think one thing for me is that, like, you have to slow down a little bit, right? Because like life, the hustle and bustle, just burst at times, like, you don't even realize that it could be a story. Like, this just popped in my head. I had another conversation with somebody earlier, and she was talking about like the most random thing that happened to her, which sparked a conversation about my dog, who is he's a naughty puppy, and I love him. He's the love of my life. But it was so funny because we were staying at a hotel. We were going on a road trip. We were staying at a hotel, and I just want to share the story really fast, but I just didn't realize that it was a story. And now I was like, oh my God, I have to totally like share this with my audience, because we were in the hotel and I was trying to put like the do not disturb sign on the doorknob, and I opened the door and he booked it. And so I just instinct tried to grab him, and I fell and locked myself out of the room. I'm in pajama, like not dressed appropriately. Like, and there he is looking at me with a little smile on his face, like, all right, bet. So and I don't have treats to lure him back, and I'm looking at him, he's looking at me, and he books it. So I'm chasing him throughout this hotel, and people saw us, and I had to anyways, I ended up I had no leash on him. I had to carry him, walk back to the front desk, and I was like, can I get a key to my room, please? Looking crazy. And people, anyways, but all that to say was, I like thought of that, and I like this happened like 2 months ago. It just popped into my head yesterday, and I literally wrote it down right before this, of like, I'm gonna like think about this and how to bring it back to my audience, of like, for example, okay, like how, like when life literally throws things at you, like things happen unexpectedly. How do you pivot as a business owner, right? Like, you see how you can easily just like instantly, just off the riff, just start doing it, where how you can easily just connect it to your business. That's how I do it. So like, I just asked myself, what did I do today? Right? Was there a conversation that you had with a friend that really just impacted you? Did something happen today when you were on your walk that you saw, right? Like, did something funny happen to that? Like, I just talked to another conversation. She just talked about how like she used her at the grocery store buying a cantaloupe to sell one of her biggest offers, and it was one of her highest converting emails. Wow. Stories are everywhere. And that's the thing, you like, when you're like, I don't have stories, you don't have to have these really big over dramatic thing that has to happen into your life. The most relatable stories are the everyday mundane type of stories. Like, how many of us like pet parents can relate to me and my naughty ass dog who has no decorum running throughout a hotel with no pajamas. I'm sure so many of us can think of like so many other stories of that where our dogs have, our pets have absolutely embarrassed us. You know what I mean?
Yes.
And those are the
Yes.
relatable things. So it's like, how can you really relate it back to your audience? Be very clear of who it is that you're speaking to, like down to the language. So then like when you are creating that content and you're using stories to do that, you're able to just do it easily and just talk about it. And it's a really fun thing. It's a fun journey and process. And it really does give you the freedom and the permission to show up how you want to show up. Also too, while connecting with your audience. I just like said a whole bunch of stuff. I don't know if that's helpful, but
No, but I love that.
Yeah.
It's so true because, I think, especially when you get down to working on things for your business, especially for your
Mhm.
marketing, right? You're like, what quirky things can I say? What fun things can I say? And a lot of times it's really just about your own experience.
it's your own experience. And I think with the fact of, there's been so many changes in our industry, just in the entrepreneurial space in general in the past few years. But no matter what has changed, whether algorithms, whatever, all throughout the years, the only thing that has always stayed consistent and has always been my anchor has been storytelling. Storytelling is never going to go anywhere. The only thing that has changed about storytelling is the way that we share the stories. That's it. But storytelling has always been there and it's never going to go away. Now the things that we have to pivot is like, we just change the way that we're sharing it because right now we have shorter attention spans. We have to, have stronger hooks. Like there's just so many, my mind can just go forever of like the different ways that we could be sharing stories today. But I think again, like you can make it what you want it to be. So I think again, just really taking that time to slow down. I get my best ideas when I'm going on a walk and then all of a sudden I'll have all these random stories of like experiences that happened in my day to day that I didn't even think of because I was always just on the go. So it's like, if you can slow down and really just like center yourself and ground yourself, you'll be able to start pulling them out and just start collecting them, just start collecting the stories. And so that's like my biggest like encourager for people that are like, I don't have a story to share or anything like that. It's like you do. And also just getting out of that mindset is just also to that shift of like, I have something to say. You deserve to take up space. And so that's something I always like to remind people of, that is like, when people say that they just don't have anything to share, it's like, okay, well then are you saying that you just don't, like you have a business, right? Like you have everyday things that are happening in your life. Like you deserve to take up space. You deserve to be seen. So I think a mindset shift as well too is really important.
I'm shocked just watching you on the spot give us an example of how you can come up with this, like not come up with them, but like how you can transform like a mundane thing into something bigger. Like that really, like everyone can do that. Like unless you just sit all day, like things are happening and you can look back at them and either make something of it or just.
But even if you're sitting there, you were sitting there, there's probably a show that you were watching, right? Like I was watching a show and Bridgerton. Oh my gosh, I just watched Bridgerton. And I am so like, I don't ever cave into trends. If people are like, watch the show, I'm like, that's okay. I'll wait 2 years later. So I am really late to the Bridgerton game and I'm watching season 1 currently. And I was like, number one, I don't get the hype. So I'm already going against the grain. But there were already like things in the story where I was like, I do not like this. And I've already been like starting to talk about just like the courting and the dating and then like what is his name? The Duke. He just is a mess. And I was like, the Duke needs therapy. But anyways, besides that, I was instantly like, how am I going to relate this back to my business of like when you have a client that just can't make up their mind about you? Like that literally came to me while I was watching Bridgerton.
I love that.
You know what I mean? So I was like, all right, bet I'm going to make content of that. I literally wrote that down as I was watching Bridgerton and like wrote on my notepad. Then I sat down and then I kept watching my show.
That's amazing.
You know what I mean? Like it's all around us. You just have to lean and come from a place of curiosity. You have to be open to receiving them, right? Like it'll pop up in the most amazing ways or even mundane ways. Like, and like I said, like when I brought up the story about my dog, when he ran out the hotel, I literally didn't even think of that and that happened 2 months ago. I just finally remembered it just earlier today. So like they can come at any time. There's no timeline to it. And I was like, even if something happened to you, like you don't see the connection, it can eventually come back later where you can absolutely use that for your business. So now I'm going to use that story with the hotel and Bridgerton for my business.
Yeah.
Like I can just get content ideas all the time. So one thing that I always love to suggest to people of like, again, when you're saying like, okay, I just said earlier, right? Write what you did today. Or if you want to write like how you got started in your business, whatever that story is, right? You as an individual have changed and you've shifted and you've evolved. So your relationship with the story changes. So like for me, the way that I truly do my content is like, I will go back, I have my library of stories and I will go back and reread it. And the way that I interpreted it just yesterday is different than the way that I interpreted it today. So therefore I'm able to pull out fresh ideas, new original content ideas from that, right? Because your experience has changed. Your the way you view the world is different than how you did just even yesterday or even 5 minutes ago, 5 seconds ago. So I always have these library of stories, and I continuously add to it, right? Because like the story is never done. If you were living and breathing, your story is never finished. And so I either continue to add to it, or I just go back and reread it and see what that triggers in me. And I'm like, all right, like, oh, I can talk about this, and I'll just pull it out. Like, and I just make content off of it. Like, how do I want to attract people? What emotions do I want people to feel? That's like one of the main things with storytelling. You have to really lean into empathy, because like the body, this is how powerful storytelling is. Sorry guys, I'm like rambling, so please let me know.
No, I love it.
Like,
The questions that I had, you're answering it. So I'm like, I don't even need to ask it, because I was going to ask you, like from a business owner's perspective, like, yeah, like what power do stories hold?
They hold a lot of power, right? Like I think now, especially today, if you want to stand out, when you have AI and Chat GPT, which I think you can absolutely leverage it to hone in your storytelling skills, but you have these things where it's so easy to make content off the riff. Like your experiences, your transparency, your honesty, the way that you view the world, that is your superpower. That is like, AI can't take that away. AI can't build, like you can put in your story and help it refine it, but it can't build emotion. You have that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so when I'm saying like build like your storytelling library, like I said earlier, the best way to be an amazing storyteller is be a collector of stories. So building out that storytelling library, and it's always there for you. That is evergreen content that is always there for you, because that is your life and your experiences. And so when I said earlier of like how storytelling, it has physiological and psychological effects on your body. Like, so when you're telling a story, those emotions, you have to be very, very clear on the emotions that you want people to feel and experience. And you need to go deep, right? Because when somebody is coming to work with me as a storytelling strategist, they'll be like, yeah, I want to share my story. Okay, great. Why? Why do you want to share your story, right? And they're like, well, I want to be able to make more sales. Okay, great. Why do you want to make more sales? Well, because, I want to have more money. Okay, but why do you want to have more money? And you just keep going, breaking down that why. The deep-seated reason why the person wants to come to me is because they would like to have that money to be able to have, more freedom in their business, to spend time with their families. Or I've had a client that was like, hey, like I'm at my wit's end. You're my last hope. Like I need this money because like my family is desperate. Like that's the real reason why they're coming to me. So you need to be able to be very clear on what that pain point is and that emotion that you're going to be targeting. That's what your story needs to address, because people buy off of feelings. I can list off like, yeah, my storytelling intensive, I have my target audience analysis and all. I can list what it comes with, but they don't give a shit. They want to know, oh my God, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry if I swore. Please edit that out.
No, you're good. You're good.
Okay. I'm like, when I just go.
We do it all the time.
Okay,
when you said sorry, I was like, what are you apologizing for?
Oh, okay. Okay, great. I'm like, you're getting like true, like authentic Akua. So I'm like, we love it. Like, all the time, Bailey's like, I'm editing that out. I'm like, okay. So yeah, but anyways, like they like at the end of the day, what they truly care about is the problem that's being solved. Like these are the things, your stuff that what you're giving is what's going to help them solve that. But what they care about mainly is the like that transformation that they're going to get and what emotions they're going to experience from that. And so I think those are just so key things with storytelling, like just really leading from empathy. People have to be able to like see themselves in your story, which is why I said earlier that the most relatable stories are the most mundane. Because like the cantaloupe, like I can see myself standing in a grocery store wanting to, when she shared her cantaloupe story, where like you can buy a cantaloupe $7 where it's pre-cut for you, or you could get the cantaloupe that's $2 and you cut it at home. But when you get it at home, you don't cut it. How many of us have done that? We've all done that, right? Like I can see myself in that story. So when she leveraged that to sell her course, she was able to. So you know what I mean? And so I think that's just what's so cool. It's like really being clear on your audience's pain point and really painting that picture of them where they can see themselves, physically see themselves in it, because then they're able to experience the emotions that you want them to experience. And when you're able to lean into that emotion, that empathy piece, you can get them to do whatever you want. That sounds horrible, but we're doing it for good. We're doing it for good, but you can literally get them to, they're literally going to be able to purchase from you 1,000%.
Yeah. I love too that you talk about like collecting multiple stories, because I think when people think of storytelling, they're like, okay, well, I'm not writing a book.
Yeah.
Right. Like, or like they think it has to be like all cohesive into one big story. But that's not the case.
That's not the case. And is life like that? No, we are multifaceted human beings every single day. There are so many things that are shaping us, molding us, like things that we're seeing that we didn't see yesterday, or you know what I mean? And so it's like, you can't view it that way. So like, every time, and that's the thing, people think like when they are collecting their stories, like I said, when they write their like origin story, like how I got started in my business, they think they're sharing just that one piece of story. And I'm like, you don't realize how there are so many other stories within that one piece of story, right? So that's where I'm like, you have to really open up your mind and lean to a place from curiosity. So like, go back and reread it. What parts are like triggering something in you? Like listening to your body, your mind, your heart. Like storytelling is truly like, it's an overall encompassing thing. Like it can pull things out where you're more vulnerable, where, you know, maybe you're funny, or I've learned so many. I didn't realize I was funny until I started sharing stories and people tell me now that I'm funny. I still don't believe I'm funny, but people tell me I'm funny. So I'm like, but it's just like, it just pulls out really cool things in you that you just never knew that were possible. And it allows your audience to see you in a very different light, because I have had people who have booked with me, and I don't post all the time on Instagram. I'm not going to act like I do, you guys. I don't have a big audience, but I've had people who have bought from me because they saw my content. It was very clear what my values were. It was very clear who I was, and they loved that. And they were like, I want to work with you immediately, boom, and booked. And so I think it just goes to show that how you can leverage it to sell your products or services where people don't have to question, right? Like they're like, no, I know I want to buy from this person. And so that's how powerful it is. It really does like take the load off for me personally. I love it because it just makes selling so much easier for me.
Do you think business owners fear that maybe their stories aren't going to connect with their target audience?
1000%.
Yeah.
Yes, but this is where like you have to get really clear. So anytime I'm sharing my stories, right? I always like to say, obviously knowing your target audience, I really could care less how long you've been in business. Like you need to know. So when people work with me, like I had an entrepreneur who's like an entrepreneur for 10 years. So I already felt like, oh, she obviously like knows her stuff. And she did my target audience analysis, and I was able to pull out so many more deeper things. And it's so important that you know who your target audience is. But then once you have that, right, and you have their pain points, and then you know the emotions that you want them to experience, really asking yourself, like, what is the purpose of this story? Why are you sharing it, right? Like if you cannot make a connection back to the people that you're speaking to, do not share it, right? Like use that as a filter. Like what value am I providing for them, and what action do I want them to take? Like asking yourself those questions to where you can really like filter out essentially what stories are relevant and what are not. And so that's why I always like to say, like, just write it down, because it may not be relevant today, but it could be relevant tomorrow. Like I said, like I'm gonna keep bringing up the puppy story because I literally did not think of that, and that just came up to me today. I'm like, oh yeah, let me talk about like how just unexpected life turns and how that relates to entrepreneurship. And so, and like even also when you're being embarrassed, yeah, we're always embarrassed in entrepreneur. I was embarrassed, but we're always also always feeling embarrassed in entrepreneurship. But who cares? Like, you know what I mean? Like stuff like that, where that wasn't relevant to me 2 months ago, but it's relevant to me today. And so, you know, it always just, life is always flowing, right? Like, and that's just how storytelling is. Just, I don't know if I'm just doing this motion. So if you're seeing this on video, it allows you to free flow back and forth and wherever. It just takes you on a really, really cool journey.
Yes, totally. How do you identify, like when you're like, okay, I have this group of stories that I think could work for my marketing. How do you identify like what emotions match your brand, your brand voice? You know, like if you typically go for like, you know, quirky, fun, you know, like serious, but yeah, just kind of like free spirited. But maybe some of your day-to-day stories are a little sad. Like or do you just kind of like tweak the story in a way? How do you make it work?
Yeah. Okay. So one question I also want to say too is like, well, one thing I want to address before, because people always think too they have to share something really sad or whatever. Like also too in storytelling, why I said it's so free flowing is because you matter in the process. A lot of times we find ourselves making content because we have to, because it's what our target audience wants, but sometimes it may not be fulfilling for us. So there's that. I always like to say, people, you also matter. So you can honor yourself. You are in control with storytelling. You control the narrative, which is what I love about it, right? So if there's something that you are not comfortable sharing, who says you have to share it? You don't have to share it, right? Anything can be made into a story. Your lunch can be made into a story. So do not feel like you have to like share your deepest and darkest secrets or things that like you want to share, but maybe you're not ready to share it yet. That's totally fine. Like really think about what your boundaries are and honor yourself within that, because you're going to appreciate it and you're going to have a lot of fun, and your audience is also going to appreciate that. But also too of like, where do you really just, how even too of like, how do my voice, right? Like you asked that question too. So I'm kind of like layering it to like 3 different parts. So even with like how my voice even too, what I have done, which was this was from Ashton Carter, because I was in her course, and that was been like amazing for me. And she said to go back and like listen to old interviews, like go back and listen to old interviews, old copy, anything like that, and listen to yourself, like read old copy and like, how did you sound? What were things that you liked about how you sounded and what were things that you didn't like? Right. And so that was also too how I started to find my voice. I would say like, hey y'all, I always put that in my copy. I send it to everybody all the time. And so like I noticed that trend because I went back and looked and I said, okay, so now I put that in my copy. And like I'm a little bit more sassy, really sarcastic a little bit, not heavily, but like I'm a little sassy and sarcastic in my copy. And I only knew that because I went back and looked. I didn't realize that because right when you're in it, you don't think about that by yourself. We get so much in our head. But if you're able to just take a step out and like look at yourself, like objectively, right? And then you're able to see those things. So I was like, oh, I'm kind of sassy. So then even in turn of like brand voice, I knew I wanted to be witty. I knew I wanted to be a little bit sassy and fun. But in terms of the emotions that I wanted people to feel, I had to, again, put myself in it, but then take myself out of it, if that makes sense. So number one, like for me as a storytelling strategist, right? I think of my own experience when I was getting ready to start my own story, when I shared my story earlier, where I was like, you know, my coach was like, hey, I want you to share this. And I was like, absolutely not. You've lost your damn mind. And, you know, that whole experience, I remembered why, the deeper rooted issues, right? Like I felt a lot of shame. I felt a lot of guilt. I felt like I wasn't worthy. I felt very small. I felt, right? So I think of those types of things. And I'm like, I bet you there's somebody in my audience that already feels that way. So now, right, like I think now I'm going to take myself out of it, right? Because I moved on from that, but there's somebody that could be there. So now I take myself out of it. And now I'm like, all right, let me look at my story and pull this specific piece out. So I'm like, okay, I could just start it off of like, how would I want to start this off? I'm like, just wing it. I could easily just start it off and be like, okay, look, my coach told me that your story is a gift. I just started right in the middle, right? I'll help the people piece everything together. My coach looked me dead in my eye and told me that my story is a gift. During that time, I felt extremely ashamed and guilty about all the things that I had walked through. I didn't even share what I walked through, right? Like, do you see what I'm saying? Like, I'm kind of just starting to make the connection because also too, like, you feel like you have to start your story from beginning, middle, end. Who says you have to? You can start in the middle. That's the beauty of it, right? You can just do whatever you want and people will be able to piece it. You don't have to make it complicated. So, you know, I think there's just so much beauty within that. And so I just like went pume, but I'm going to bring it back of like really doing that brand voice to really see how you are, but then also to like what emotions, like I have like, there's people that feel that way, but what are the emotions I want them to feel after the fact? And I want people to feel empowered because I felt empowered when I shared my story. I want people to feel confident in their voice because I felt confident in my voice. Do you see how you're like, you take yourself in it, but then you got to take yourself out of it for a second? Like, I don't know if that makes sense, but that's truly like how I do it. So like, I think about like, well, how, because I walked myself through my own service. So I also like to say that too. That's for me. I walked myself through it because I was like, I want to see what like this pulls up for me to see if it is effective for other people. So that's why for me, I was like, well, I know how I felt. So that's where I was like, I know how, and I knew how I felt after I walked through it. So now that's how I want other people to feel as well. So like, if you aren't clear of how you want people to feel, you should be testing your services, products and services, whether in beta or if you can yourself and see how you feel. Because that also too really gave me the perspective and the emotions that I want people to experience and the transformation I wanted people to experience.
Love that.
I think it's so interesting, like this kind of, you wrapping this into this, like put it in perspective that what happens in the story isn't like the important thing, but like we've all felt shame, we've all felt guilt, we've all felt little, and it might be completely different things, but it's the emotions that we all felt that kind of connects this to us. Like I haven't been through what you've been through.
But you can relate to me though.
Yes.
You have, because you have felt that way. So it's not necessarily the concept, right? So I can already think of another story outside of that big piece where I also still felt that way. That was maybe mundane, where somebody, this just happened to me at a conference just about a week ago. This woman, I met her and she completely dismissed me. And I'm gonna be transparent. I felt like I was like, damn, you know what I mean? And I had to go back and do my affirmations of like, nah, Akua, like you're like, you deserve to take up space. You know what I mean? But like, those are those same emotions that I experienced, right, as an individual. And so I love how you shared that. Yeah, like think about again those emotions and like you don't have to share that specific story. What other stories have happened in your life to where like maybe this isn't as heavy, maybe it's a little bit lighter, and I can share that piece, but the emotions are still the same that you want people to experience.
Wild. And I thought I didn't have a story.
But I'm sure the wheels are turning now where you're like, oh, I can like,
I remember 100%.
And that piece and like how I can connect it. Yes. Yeah.
I want to jump back just a little bit because earlier you mentioned that you get your best ideas when you walk.
Yeah.
And when you said that, I thought about how this sounds crazy, but I get my best ideas when I'm waking up in the morning, but you're still half asleep. Yeah. And then when I'm like waking myself up with an idea, I immediately like grab my phone half asleep, and it makes no sense, but I write all of it down and then I try to make sense of it when I'm awake. But I guess my point here is just that like what do you recommend in people trying to find where they get their best ideas?
That's a really good idea, and that's just so much beauty in that. Honestly, that's a really fun space to be in where like you have an opportunity to be curious. And I think a lot of the times in entrepreneurship, curiosity is truly key. And so when you're trying to figure out your best, the way even how I figured out my own best idea, it honestly came from desperation. How I figured out walking was it for me because I was burnt out as hell. And I was just like, I'm exhausted. I'm tired. Let me just put in a podcast episode. And I walked around the lake when I lived in Minneapolis. And I was just walking and just being more present, right, in the moment. And all of a sudden I had the best, like some of the best content ideas that I had. And I was like, oh shit. And I just like typed them in. And then I recentered myself and right and grounded. And so I think for business owners, really think of the things that light you up, that bring you joy. And it can show up in the most unexpected ways, whether that is taking like 5 minutes just to sit and enjoy tea and just look outside the window, right? Or, going for a walk like me. Like for me, I also love to tap and ground myself like sometimes. And I have had the best ideas also too, when I listen to podcasts that are not necessarily business centered. That's where I can come up with some of the best innovative ideas that have, because I listen to somebody else that has nothing to do with entrepreneurship, right? So I think it's a really beautiful moment to really get to know yourself and see the things that you love to do. And that's where you really learn where some of your ideas coming from, but just slowing down and just making that space for yourself, even if that's just sitting there for 5 minutes silent, you know what I mean? I think that is great. You can come up with some of your best ideas, but lean into curiosity as you're trying to like explore that. Like, is it like for me, I love pottery. I've also had great ideas come with pottery and I was like covered in mud and I was like, shit, like,
How do I write it down?
how do I write it down? And I had to like hurry up and like, you know what I mean? But like, I have learned so many things about myself in business when I have tried things out of that I've never tried before and I failed as well. You know what I mean? And like pottery was such a hard thing. Like I was not good at it and I'm still not good at it, but I love it because I get some of my best innovative ideas and also too it creates like more resiliency, right? Because it's really humbling and fun to also do something that you are bad at because then it reminds you as a business owner that I can do something and be bad at it and it'll like, it'll evolve. Because I think I've only been in business now for 5 years, 4. I don't even know.
Amount of time.
I know, right? Like, but it's easy to forget what it was like starting for you, right? Because you're just always going. And so I like to try to remind myself of like, Akua, like, how did you feel when you started? Because that feeling is, anybody who knows the start of business, you just know that feeling, right? And what it was like, that fear that you felt. And sometimes I find it's kind of exhilarating to feel that again because you're like, oh yeah, like I'm on the right track. Like this is how I evolve and grow as a business owner. And so as you're somebody too that's like leaning more into like, how do you find these ideas? Like do different things that are new because it's also too going to build that resiliency for you as a business owner. And you can come up with some of the best ideas that you would have never thought of if you didn't just think outside the box and try something new.
I love that. Jessie, any last minute questions?
I think you've covered everything.
No, that was amazing. Akua, thank you so much for joining us because I love storytelling.
Yeah.
The only time I've really dabbled into it is like the LinkedIn storytelling, which I know is its own, piece of strategy and
Yes.
and tying it back.
Yes, and LinkedIn's known for storytelling. Like that is where you gotta like it's a big if you are even somebody who wants to even just explore storytelling, go to LinkedIn. Just look what people I hate when people say this is personal, but I was like, just share it. I'm like, you didn't have to start it like that. Just say it. But either way, I think it's a really, really cool way for people just to even just start dabbling with storytelling, but also too, like there's so many different ways that you can share a story. Like so especially now in today's age with like storytelling trends, like micro stories are huge right now.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know if you know who Risa Tisa is. Do you guys remember her? Do you know her? If you're on TikTok? Okay, well, look her up. She became an overnight TikTok sensation from sharing a 50-part video TikTok series called Who the F Did I Marry? And she did these bite-sized videos, micro stories, and 50 parts. Those 50 videos equated to 8 hours of watch time, and people watched it from beginning to end.
That is
Wow.
Yeah, so go look at it. The story was crazy, but her story, she's a gifted storyteller naturally. And it's a very crazy, traumatic story, but she's moved on where you can find so much humor in it, like she can, you know what I mean? So it was the way that she shared it was beautifully, but because of that, she like literally got a huge influencer deal and is now doing brand deals and everything, an everyday individual. Like that's how powerful
amazing.
storytelling is.
Yeah.
And like that's micro storytelling, right? Like again,
And
really it can be, and like not saying that long form content isn't still powerful, it absolutely is, but what I'm saying is like storytelling has the way that we share stories can look in so many different ways, and so just explore that. That's where it's a fun time to explore it.
I love it. I love it. Well, thank you so much for joining us and
Yes.
giving us some of your secrets into storytelling. Before I forget, where can people find you online?
Yes. Also, I have my storytelling quiz. So if people, which was made in Interact.
We're
so
going
it,
that.
yeah. So if people want to learn like your storytelling style, which I poured my heart and soul into that quiz. So, and my friend Kayla helped me put it together. And so she took all of my thoughts and made it beautiful. But if you want to learn your storytelling style, where I have like really, really unique strategies based on each personality type, definitely take that quiz. And then also you can find me at Akua Konadu _ on Instagram. Send me a message, DM. I always love to send either videos or voice messages back. And then you can find me on my website, akuakonadu.com. And you can also find me on the Independent Business Podcast by Honeybook. If you want to get some amazing entrepreneurial tips on how to run your business. So yeah, that's where you can find me.
We love it. Well,
Yes.
thank you so much. And for those who are listening, we'll see you next time. Bye.